His presidency amounted to a long list of firsts, like being impeached twice. And now he has an infamous one to add to his resume as he runs for re-election. Donald Trump, the first former American president to face criminal charges. His New York arraignment started this hour 1 day ago. No telling how long the political implications may last and what they may be, if any. To dive deeper into that, I'm joined now by GOP consultant Tim Rosales and Democratic analyst Andrew Acosta. Gentlemen, good morning to you.
Good morning.
It has been an historic 24 hours in America, definitely. Now, since the beginning of this probe, former President Trump has said it was a persecution, not a prosecution, as one of his ways to try and discount the investigation that was happening. He and his surrogates have posted to social media pictures of him holding a bat to the head of the DA bringing this case, Alvin Bragg, calling him out for alleged partisanship with this effort. But there are like 23 people on New York grand juries. DAs turn to grand juries, so it's not just them going in alone with the charge. So why is that concept not holding any water for a lot of voters looking at this situation, Tim?
Well, I think a few things. One, the federal government declined to press charges, on these very same charges. The Federal Elections Commission said there was nothing there, last year. And, just this week, Alvin Bragg declined to prosecute a guy who had 90 arrests for felony robbery, and wanted to bump it down to a misdemeanor charge. So I don't think Bragg's doing himself any favors on this. Certainly I'm no fan of the former president, President Trump here, but I think that there are a lot of questions being raised on both sides about the veracity of these charges and the forum in which it's being held.
Andrew, what do you think? Are there a lot of questions, or does this seem pretty straightforward to you?
Well, I think it depends on what camp you're in. If you're a liberal who has always hated President Trump, then you're obviously waiting for this indictment and him to be put in jail. And if you're Marjorie Taylor Greene in that crowd, you compare him to, Jesus and Nelson Mandela.
Just a few hours after pleading not guilty to 34 felony counts of falsifying New York business records in an attempt to conceal potential sexual liaisons with hush money payments during his first presidential run, Donald Trump spoke to supporters at Mar-a-Lago. Andrew, did that 25-minute speech draw anyone new to his political movement, do you think, or is this only doubling down with those already on board?
No, I think this country is locked in. There's the latest polling, and it's early to see how this thing plays out, but independent voters are sort of tired of this act. There's a hardcore Trump base that just thinks that this is a witch hunt, and then there's a progressive base that, like I said, has been against the president, always will be against the former president. And I'm sure they're watching CNN and MSNBC, and the other crowd's watching Fox, and that's just kind of where it is. And there's a lot of people in the middle who aren't watching this. I think they're tired of this act and tired of this dialogue, or lack of dialogue. It's just two sides screaming at each other.
Tim, do you think that that's where a growing number of Americans might be, in that middle that Andrew was just describing?
Oh, I absolutely agree. And I think the data backs up exactly what Andrew is saying, is that, you think of it like a bell curve. You've got, two tails, right? The tail on the right and tail on the left. And then in the middle, where you have a lot of people who are just, they're tired. They're tired of this. They're tired of, what they're seeing from President Biden. I think they're a growing number of those folks who have some, discontent with what's happening at every level of government, and that's not a good thing necessarily. We should have some levels of trust, but the data backs up that there really isn't, and they're looking for something, and that could bode well if the Republicans can have a candidate that is different than President Trump as their presidential nominee. And I think that bodes well for them. If not, I think that, President Biden certainly is in a strong position if he can, lock down elements of those independents and his Democratic base.
Okay, speaking of President Biden, he's in this race for 2024, even though he hasn't officially said so. Does this prosecution of the man he beat in 2020 harm him in that effort? Does his press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, refusing to comment about yesterday's arraignment, does that harm him, Tim?
No, if I was him, I would keep his head down and talk about everything else. I would talk about issues that are impacting American voters and stick to that. And I would not comment on what is happening in New York City and stay as far away from that as possible. As much distance as he can put between himself and former President Trump and what is going on with Alvin Bragg, I think the better it is for President Biden.
What's your take on that, Andrew?
No, I agree. I mean, I think there was a time when in politics, if your opponent was in a hole, you hope they just kept digging. I don't think Trump cares about being in a hole or digging. He just doubles down on it. And if I was Biden, I'd just keep doing what I'm doing to look like, more of a statesman and try to get some wins on the board.
So, with many expecting the entry of Florida Governor Ron DeSantis into the 2024 presidential race, we've had that with the former governor of Arkansas, Asa Hutchinson, getting in this past weekend, saying that as he did within his own administration, that anyone indicted should resign. In this case, that Trump should step aside while this plays out. Has Trump just sucked up all the air in the room, so to speak, even though he's the focus of several investigations? Is there truly any room for any other Republican in this race, Andrew?
I think watching Donald Trump, he's brilliant at working the media by, saying that he's going to be arrested on a Tuesday at 5 o'clock or whatever. He just dominates the airwaves. And, so is there room for another candidate or two? Of course. But, this is a presidential, it's a long haul. And once you're in, people really start to pick and prod at you. And, the shiny new ball can really go downhill quickly. And I think you're seeing that with DeSantis. And, he's not sure how to characterize this. He made some pointed remarks about payments to, porn stars, and he got blowback from Republican voters. So that's a hard part for him.
Okay, Tim, just quickly, we're almost out of time.
I think Republicans have to get down to the grassroots and really speak to those voters. They're not going to win this, the other candidates in the national media, but they've got to do this, in the caucuses in Iowa, in the primaries in early states, and be able to, talk about, the issues and win the hearts and minds of Republican voters who are ready for maybe something a little bit different.
All righty, gentlemen, as always, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.